Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Nimra with South Asians in Sports. I am the program director, so I have the cool job of putting on these type of conversations and connecting with industry experts on different topics. And so a little bit about South Asian in Sports. Uh, South Asian in Sports is a nonprofit community that helps connect and amplify South Asians across the sports industry. We also have people in the entertainment industry now, so it's really cool to see the representation and the access that we have and just celebrate our voices and the stories as we shape the future of sports. Some cool things that you get to do if you become a member, which you should do using this QR code, is attend our virtual speaking series. We have networking events in person and online that you get access to some of the high level executives, and also just, become long-term friends with some of these people. Community app that we get to connect with each other in a directory. And we also have a mentorship program, which actually is going on now. We have some really cool mentors. Some of the mentors in the past have included people from C-suite, NBA, NFL, Premier League, MLSE. So a lot of cool people across the industry are willing to give back to people who are students, young professionals or mid-level professionals. So make sure you sign up for that. And then also we have really cool access to different industry events and conferences. For example, we have a cool partnership with the Sports Business Journal, and we get to go to some of their conferences and attend virtually as well. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers for today. Um, Our moderator for today is Radha, also known as RB. She is an expert partner in strategy and leadership at Think Beyond, which is a strategic consulting company driving sports brands and entertainment to be more sustainable, impactful, and profitable. And then we also have Sada Hussain, who is the head of environment at the FIFA World Cup 2026. So I'm very looking forward to this topic today. And I think sustainability is one thing that we really don't think of in sports, but it's really cool to see these two worlds collide. So with that, I'll pass it on to you, Radha and Sada, and let you guys take it from there.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for inviting us to have this conversation. I'm going to start by saying I'm a little bit jealous that Sarah chose to wear her shirt and I didn't, because I'm also a Liverpool fan. They happen to be a client as well, which makes it all the more complicated sometimes. But it's great to be here. And I sort of ran into Sarah a few months ago at a conference where we were both speaking. We've had conversations since then. And I'm excited to sort of help Sarah bring to life actually the vast amount of work that's happening across sport, but specifically soccer, as it pertains to sustainability, and try and bring that topic sort of up in the open for you guys. So let's start by getting to know you a bit, Sarah. You didn't start your career in the sports industry. So can you share with us a little bit about your journey and then how you landed in sports, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, no, thanks. Thank you, Radha. Good to see you again. Like you said, we met a couple months ago, and was great. And thank you, Nimra and all for having me as well. Yeah, no, don't come from the sports world. Don't be fooled by my shirt. My husband is a fan, but at the same time, I wanted to represent for Radha. But I actually started. So I hail from Houston, Texas. I'm based in Miami right now, but I started out in different industries. So I started out in oil and gas, moved into the tech world for a while, and then kind of stumbled upon sports, and always been in the sustainability and environmental compliance world, but really now have focused into sustainability and where it fits for the sports world, but specifically within the mega event space, because definitely sports obviously is day in and day out, but it's this mega event space that no matter whether it's sports or something else, how does that kind of play into the sustainability realm? So it's been an interesting ride. It's been about a little over a decade, and I'd say for me, it's been something that's been really cool to see the same concepts, just a different product.
And what was the sport role that made that transition for you from sort of tech into the sports world?
Ooh, that's a good one. It'll be a little bit close to home for me, so it may not be something that it was always an industry I was looking at necessarily. It wasn't a natural one for me to fall into as oil and gas or tech was. However, for me, it was the reach that the sports world had versus the other industries that I had been part of. So obviously, we will fill up our car with gas, oil and gas, sure. We all open up Facebook and Instagram, so tech kind of naturally fell into it. But even when you look at the reaches of those industries, the sports world continues to blow me away every day. And so the impact that any discipline you're in can have for me was really the selling point to say, hey, let's try it out.
Okay, so if impact and reach is the thing, then FIFA is absolutely the place to be, which is obviously where you are. Would love to talk a little bit more then about what you're doing at FIFA. It's a big title for a big job, 3 countries, a load of games, all over the place. Each has its own host committee. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're responsible for, and then we'll try and break it down and into like real tangible things that you do and have done.
Yeah. No, it's a heavy title, which I don't know, it's just head of environment. So, I mean, do I control the planet? Like I thought about that kind of coming in and being like interesting way of wording it. But no, it's a really neat role that I can't say I've seen in a lot of other orgs. So my main role is we have a tournament-wide strategy around sustainability. So my role really focuses around 7 key objectives that sit on the strategy. And I'll try not to be too mundane with this, but I think it'll help bring scope for those that don't necessarily sit in the sustainability space. We focus on climate, we focus on air pollution, we focus on waste management, we're looking at water conservation, we're looking at biodiversity, we're looking at fan education. These are the key pieces for us when we look at sustainability in the environment, that my role's main day-to-day task is to execute across these points. And they're, once again, big buckets, so maybe I'm broadening the scope here, but those all and how do they fall into any single one of our operations. So for those that maybe aren't as familiar with the tournament, I wasn't coming in. We have 60 different departments working, and all 60 have an environmental impact. And they may fall into all of these buckets that I just listed, or they may only fall into some. So my role is day in and day out, which connections are there, with each one of those 60 departments among our strategic objectives. I've got a team across the tournament that sits in Miami, Mexico City, and Toronto, and we're trying to also then layer in those local market differentiations that come across any of these departments or objectives that we have. So, give a big answer to your to your question, but that is my day to day.
Okay, so a bunch of areas. Are there any targets that you're able to share with us that in any of them in terms of what FIFA's trying to achieve?
Oh, yeah. Let me see. I should probably go back and read my NDA. But okay, I think there's some. There's definitely some I can share. So I mean, around climate, we align, shocking to probably most, is we actually do align with the UN, and they have a sports climate framework, which was news to me, but definitely came up to speed pretty quickly on that. And so we align with those, and their targets are similar to a lot of other industries and organizations, but this one focuses on sport, where by 2030, FIFA has to half operational emissions across its operations. It's interesting for FIFA because they're so like event to event. So it's been interesting, like how would they build that up versus when you look at a regular company or organization, right? They're looking at that long term. They have the same operations, and versus us for 26, it's North America. For 2030, it's Morocco, Spain, and Portugal. Vastly different. So for us in 26, what I'd say our target is that we're trying to, of that half, we're actually contributing 20% reduction in our overall operational emissions. I think I can say that. I'd say, around food waste, we have a big piece. So we look at all these mega events, and especially in the sports sector, I mean, everybody's going to go, they're going to buy a hot dog, they're going to buy a burger, and so on and so forth. We aim not necessarily on the front end, but on the back end to donate any leftover food across our operations, obviously within region concessions, catering, those that we can, across all 16 stadiums across the 3 countries. So that's another target. We're going to 100% any leftover food that obviously is viable will be donated for this tournament. And then last piece, we hope to actually align, I'd say another target is around biodiversity protection. And there where I think I am happy to announce that, for us, it combines with our climate piece that so obviously this tournament's going to have an environmental impact. We're bringing in temporary infrastructure. We're going to bring in more traffic. We're going to bring in more people to these host cities. We're going to, step on a lot of things. We're going to break a lot of things. So one area of mitigation that we have is that we're planting 1 million trees across North America. This isn't one-to-one offsets, but it's a mitigation plan to help bring more green space to obviously the pollution that we're bringing in over time to actually help, those areas still have those systems in place that can help with clean air. And so with those that why I'm saying this not only to one, obviously tell you what we're doing, but the target there would also then we are going to be setting up sensors across these cities, which is a new one for us. And I'll break that down of where we want to show for the 2 years after the tournament how this type of initiative around biodiversity protection and climate protection of having these green spaces, how does that actually stimulate more biodiversity and wildlife to come about? And we're partnering with an organization to bring those sensors in and have a 2-year plan post. So that's the other kind of target that I put out there.
That's brilliant. That's really exciting. I'm glad to see you measuring that because it makes such a difference in that post world to actually look at some of those initiatives, particularly, trees take a long time to grow. There's time for things to happen that we need to make happen. So thinking about this variety of targets, they need to be achieved, as you said, across these 60 departments, right? Laddering up. As you look across FIFA and as you've gone to embed your sustainability strategy, which departments have sort of grasped onto it and understood how it adds value to them? And which ones have you had to find new and interesting ways to help them better understand the value of doing this to them, as well as to FIFA as a whole and therefore the world?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm trying to think of who I can put on blast since this is a closed door. We've got a different group. Sure. So I'll start with the more challenging areas, and I'll end on a on a up note. Um, Hospitality is a big one. I'd say, you can all imagine that, we have our hospitality villages, we have our suites, and all the pomp and circumstance that comes with that. So there's a lot that we're procuring. There's a lot of VIPs coming in and out, and there's a whole operation within the larger operation that's hospitality. So that's been one where, hey, what are your key areas of focus from procurement, from delivery to the on the ground operations, and where can we curtail or adjust? So that's been a big one. Our hospitality provider is on location, so it's been trying to work in lockstep where they're also working on the Olympics. They're also doing other things. So then they have their ways of working, but then we say, where can we push the needle more? So that's been a big topic of conversation for us with them. And we hope to make strides. We still got a couple of months there. Another one I'd probably point out is travel. So I mean, all of us will travel if all of you are planning to go to any matches. Sorry, I can't promise any tickets today. Radha asked me before, but sorry, I couldn't do that. But please do still come, if not to a match, to a fan festival. Always got to make that plug. But the travel team is a huge piece. So our biggest part of our footprint is travel. The teams travel, the staff travels, you all will travel, other fans will travel. We have delegations, as you can imagine, travel. And where do we curtail that? What are those small changes we can make that then really make the big impact in the long term? So those are the two that I'd call out that I don't think are specific to FIFA, but in general, the mega event space, in the sports world in general. So definitely would call those out as just areas of where the conversation is taking just longer, but we are confident in the long run. But on the upside, what I'd really say the two big things that came out for me is one, our engineering group. So when we look at temporary power, when we look at how they're going to bring in some temporary infrastructure as well, they've really made strides on where can we rent, and so that it's being reused. How do we set up proper waste management? Been really easier conversations than you would think, where versus in other industries, engineering is like the tough department, and here they've really been been quite proactive. So really have appreciated that. And then if anybody is in the logistics space, I'd say I'd give commendation here that the logistics has been a step ahead of me and really has thought through the materials that they're procuring, how they're going to dissolve these assets post this tournament, which are another big topics that I've learned in this sporting world that are really key. So definitely need allies there if there's anybody here that is in those spaces. But I'd say those have been really positive and forthcoming conversations.
And I think that sort of resonates with sort of what I see across the industry as we're working with different sports. And I realize that, perhaps we don't have a room for sustainability experts. So when we talk about travel, for example, perhaps you could just help bring to life the idea of scope 1, 2, and 3, and sort of talk about how your responsibilities in 3 and fan and what you can and can't do, and how that then relates to 1 and 2. So maybe sort of introduce what scopes 1, 2, and 3 are, and then a little bit how it relates to travel, because I think that's the easiest one for people to understand.
Yeah, for sure. And correct me if I'm, my recollection, if I'm wrong, rather, because I think it's late in the evening. So I'll have to, I don't have my climate manager on, but yeah, no, first. So in sustainability in the climate space, the way we look at our emissions and our footprint are, we scope them. We scope 1, 2, and 3. So scope 1 is our direct emissions. So, any like a lot of the times it's like if you're doing direct power generation, and so on. So that's where that would fall. And that's limited for us because we're not really doing that. That's more within other industries. And then scope 2, though, for us is, if we're renting these stadiums, so the power that we're going to be not really procuring but continuing falls into that. So those leased assets and where that electricity generation that we're just going to pull from. So we'll have a lot of our consumption at the stadium when it comes to power sits in scope 2. But most of our stuff does sit in scope 3, which is just a huge bucket. But when it comes to travel, that's where that falls for our fan travel, for a lot of also our staff travel delegations, and where our control can be hit or miss. So it can be out of our control, or we can have a portion of it as well. And so what can we do in that bucket of scope 3? That also falls a lot with our logistics, a lot of things we're procuring, our supply chain, that also falls into scope 3 a lot of the times. But for travel, it's where, that's where it would sit for us. And so where can we make some leverage, and then where can we put our influence arm as well? But that's how we look at when we're looking at our carbon footprint kind of across the board. But please, Radha, correct me if I'm wrong. I know I can kind of
That's great. And I guess I'll share a little bit of an example for where we've seen how a sports entity is able to do something meaningful in scope 3, which is the hardest thing, which is fan travel, because we need the fans to travel. Everyone has their own choice. But one of the things Liverpool were able to do, as I said, they're a client. One of their key partners, one of their top partners is Expedia. So they're able to work in partnership with Expedia to put coaches on, like buses, to take fans from Liverpool a little way down the road to a place called St Helens, which is where the Liverpool FC women's team play. And so we're reducing the number of cars on the road by having a coach or a bus take a group of fans, but it also means more fans are going to see the women's game at the same time. And so that's how sometimes sports need to work with their commercial partners in order to collectively try and tackle some of these huge world challenges. And then on another example, just to sort of show how partners come into play here, because organizations can't do it on our own. Like FIFA can do only so much. In NASCAR, for example, they have a partnership with an organization called ABB, who make electric batteries for EVs. And they've been able to put up charging stations across large swathes of the US, which is where the haulage route goes for all of the NASCAR circus that travels 38 weeks of the year. Now that's great because we can change that haulage into EVs, electric vehicles, but it also means a huge part of this country now has charging infrastructure, which makes it much more possible for people to even consider having an electrical vehicle. And so when we talk about the reach and influence of sport, it works in both how we operate it, but also what we're able to create to allow other people to make more sustainable choices in their world. So that's sort of try and bring that sort of sustainability bit to life. Sarah, as we think about mega sporting events, there's loads of them. You're out there talking about it, working on it. What are the biggest sort of challenges that are thrown at you or misconceptions you hear about sustainability and mega sporting events?
Oh, where do I begin? I'd say the biggest one, and I get it on a day to day, even from internally. Sustainability isn't always going to cost you money. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen is that, oh, if we need to go sustainable, we need to spend X, Y, and Z. And for me, coming in from other industries, but also just seeing, limited time I've been 2 years in this space, that's not always the case. It's also a lot of times like if we make small changes, like, as I said, we've got 60 departments. A lot of times, even if you make a qualitative change versus a quantitative change, that moves the needle overall towards the longer vision. So that's something that I feel always, yeah, of course you do need to make investments. I mean, you do need to, there's a lot of things that do cost money if we want to change from, if we're looking at temporary power, from just diesel generators to solar power generators, yeah, that's going to be a cost change. But there's also a very different thing around dissolution when you look at logistics and saying, hey, if we just make a plan right now on how we dissolve these, we can save money, if even, or not lose any money on the assets we need to deal with in July post tournament. So that's always the biggest thing where I always have a conversation with people where I'm like, it doesn't always have to cost money. Let's talk about your operations. Let's talk about what you do and some of the choices that are just more, process and procedure that can also change things.
Brilliant. So let's think about then the skills that you need as a leader in these spaces. And I think particularly, like if we're thinking about the World Cup and these 16 different host cities that you're influencing and engaging with, because they're responsible for their own sustainability plans as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So without sort of directly being able to tell them to do things or being able to give them some guidance and have some expectations, both whether that's the cities, whether that's federations, vendors, or partners, how do you use your influence to sort of build alignment and drive some accountability in this space, which isn't an easy space to work in?
Yeah. That's a good question. So, I mean, coming in, I'd say from a sustainability lens across, yeah, the host cities, the stadiums, even within FIFA, with any of our member associations, you know, if you're working in this space and trying to bring sustainable change, you've got to really understand the operations. So you've got to come in knowing, hey, what do they do? What do they need to do? How is it going to work for them? And I think this World Cup's been quite interesting because the model's so different. We have these 16 host cities. We don't just have one. It's not 22 where it's just Doha. It's 16 in 3 different countries. So really doing that due diligence prior is how you begin to even have the influence of, because you're coming in with a knowledge base that then you don't give them room to say, well, you didn't know this, you didn't know that. So I'd say that was the first and foremost, coming in being like, hey, hold up, we've done our due diligence. Here's not only FIFA's stance on sustainability, but here in your market is also what's important. So hey, host city, or hey, stadium, here's what is possible. Let's talk about how we can make it possible for you, because they may know the same thing, but then it's like, how can they do it, whether it's requiring to spend money or not. So that's one of the biggest things, like really making sure we understand the operations. But for me, the biggest thing coming in on top of that, whether it's in this space or any other space, when it comes to sustainability, is how can you standardize the ask? And so here, that was the biggest thing of, okay, sure, there are certain contractual requirements, but then what are those areas that we can say across the board, this is what we're fighting for, this is what we're pushing, how can we get everybody on board? Is that waste management? Is that biodiversity protection? Is that water conservation? Whatever it was that I, have said at the beginning, how do we standardize the ask across the areas? So then, even if everybody talks to each other, if we're asking for it, how can we make sure that it's theirs and we make sure we get everybody to that finish line? So those are the two big things I'd say that coming in, wanting to do, and then create that influence, just given the position of FIFA.
So then in terms of sort of standardizing the ask, is there anything that a fan, for example, should expect to see, whether they go and see a game in Houston, LA, Toronto, Mexico City, like what sort of things are you able to have that level of standardization, and is it fan facing?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a really good question. Uh yes. So I'll touch on two things. One, that was more to answer your earlier question of something that we had standardized ask across the board, and then one coming from the FIFA side. So across all stadiums, which is our main area of focus for sustainability, the host cities as well, but obviously our scope is mainly on the stadiums. Every stadium has to get a sustainable certification when they come to operations. Most of them go with LEED. I won't bore you all with what that acronym means, but know that is one of the most prominent sustainable certifications when it comes to operations. So that first and foremost, what's going to be fan facing is you will see the same bins when you go there when it comes to waste management for fans. And I know this is more of a low hanging fruit a lot of the times, but this was a huge thing that we thought about because we're going to have international fans that may be also used to more. But here, we know that there's going to be recycling across the board, and there's going to be then general waste across the board. You'll still see some compost in some of the more progressive areas, but that's one huge piece that will definitely be fan facing. Now, everything else is more back end on general operations when it comes to certification. But the other piece, something that on the FIFA side, is that on that fan education piece. So across all 16 stadiums, there's going to be a stadium fan experience zone, and there will be a allotted section to sustainability, where I'll say, if you come to a match, please come. The mascots will be in our zone. There'll be a photo opportunity, but there'll also be every fan having the option of choosing a sustainable action. There'll be three attached to each mascot, and they'll actually have to choose before they get the photo opportunity. So that then, when they are going through the stadium, they can kind of pick through those three. So that's coming from our end, though. But definitely on the fan facing side, that sustainable certification has helped, which you'll see when you enter the stadiums.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. Let's continue to sort of build on you and your career and tell us a bit about sustainability as we go through it. So you've been working in sport for a decade, right? Having spent the time prior to that. What have you seen change in terms of sport and sustainability in that time?
Oh, I haven't been in the sports world for a decade, but I can pretend. 2 years honestly feels like a decade in this
Yeah.
world, so I probably could speak to say anything. But but in sustainability, I have, and I think what comes to mind applies to sport as well as I've seen it. So the last 2 years, I did a lot on the front end to be like, okay, let me understand where sustainability sits in this space. And I will say, and Radha, one second, correct me if I'm wrong, or you've seen otherwise. I definitely see the approach to sustainability as more of a hodgepodge, if you will. There's some that are way beyond the realm of where we're like, oh wow, I'm so glad you're that far. And then it's just mixed across the rest of the board. When it comes to whether you look at leagues, whether you look at individual teams, whether you look at even if you look at the infrastructure side across stadiums and venues. From my viewpoint, it's still in its infancy. I think there's some that have taken it, and what I have appreciated is that at least it's part of the conversation. Now, what the actual executed actions you see across the board could vary. But what saying that, I'd say that data collection and data generation and really using that to drive sustainable change is the biggest shift that I see across industries, but is not different to sport. And then that's not sitting with just sustainability, right? I mean, if we were to talk about how, business revenue, fan behavior, even when we talked about, travel stats, how do we go about, adjusting that? All of that now is the argument has to be based in data. What have we seen in the past? What can we estimate for let's say this tournament, and then how do we make our decisions based off of that? So with sustainability, I don't feel there's any change. A lot of times before it was more if you had the right advocate. Now if you have the right data and you get it, you can make the argument to anyone in the organization, and that can really help make change. So I'd say that's the biggest in the last decade that I've seen. Hey, you need to have the right tools around this to really drive change in this space.
And how have you seen that sort of be valuable to you as you've moved from being in technical roles through to sort of enterprise and leadership roles? So when you're from being the one out there, maybe even collecting the data in some way, shape, or form, to now as a leader How are you then using that information?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good one. Um, So agreed. I was more on that side where it's okay, how do we collect this? What are the tools we have? I'd say moving into this role, it's now saying, okay, here's the data, but here's the risk. So articulating, okay, yeah, here's what all our evidence says, but at the end of the day, when I sit in front of our chief financial officer or head of tournament or head of strategy, it's, well, what's the risk? Sure, the data can say that, and maybe we'll get some bad PR, but what is the risk if we don't? So what that narrative looks like is now what I have to take on in this role, and really then frame that up and say, okay, what are those real, not only reputational risks, but operational risks, long-term risks for FIFA, but that can go across to any organization or industry and say, okay, that's what I'd say a role like this really needs to take on.
And then, so one of the things we talk about to our clients is absolutely the risk, but we always try and talk about it through the lens of opportunity. You're going to have to mitigate this risk anyway. What opportunity does it bring to you? What opportunities do you think taking this proactive, highly invested stance on and action on sustainability, what do you think that does in terms of opportunity for FIFA?
That what I have said to them, and I think they know it as well, and that's what they're taking on, is this won't be the first tournament, this won't be the last tournament. Whether it's the men's World Cup, women's World Cup, beach soccer, whatever you want to think. And FIFA has always been a leader in this space. And so to maintain that leadership role, looking across, obviously, all sorts of departments here, but definitely in this space where when we look at, places like UEFA and others, to say, hey, it's good, everybody's coming up to par, but for us to stay as that example, we have got to keep to our commitments. We have to keep to how we're being transparent in this space, and to really continue to move the needle as a tournament over tournament. So this opportunity, continues to, I would say blossom others, but really to keep that we maintain our leadership role in this space.
Got you. Thinking a little bit about the fact that we're here in a South Asians in Sports session, it'd be weird not to talk about our cultural identity. So let's just talk about it a little bit. Given that you're in oil and gas and tech, and now you're in sports, I think we both know that that's probably not a highly female-heavy space. How is that? Have you seen significant differences in terms of ethnicity and representation, particularly in terms of South Asians, as you've moved from one to the other?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I have. I think, coming from, if I may, some technical focused industries, there's definitely been sometimes a higher population, I'd say, of South Asians that do take on those technical roles, that have those further degrees that put them in not only, let's say, middle roles, but also leadership roles, just given their technical background. So it's always been familiar to maybe see, others that look like you. It may not always be women. I will touch on that for a second, but others that at least do look like us or our larger, community. The sports industry has been interesting. I will say when I joined, it was sparse. It quite well, not only one because the office was smaller, we've grown definitively, but also just looking across this industry that yeah, it's a little bit more. You've got to kind of find that needle in the haystack, which has been interesting to see, but definitely growing. I mean, just look at this organization in itself, and the existence of it. But it's been neat to see that growth, and I think I see it more and more as we are coming closer to tournament time with our hires, that we're getting that breadth. And I will say this world, the sports world, is probably the most vocal about trying to have as diverse of a group than I will say other industries, which I have been intrigued by.
That's interesting. That's good to hear. I've been in the sports industry for 25 years,
Mhm.
and I've more often than not been the only woman in the room, and then certainly the only brown woman in the room. And I agree. I am seeing a shift, but it's interesting to have someone come in over the last couple of years and even see that and feel that the industry is open to it. Because I think sometimes when you've been in it so long, And in an environment today where we're not even allowed to use words like DEI, right?
Yeah.
It's really, really good to hear that actually that's what you're seeing. Okay, you ready for some quick fire questions?
Sure, for sure, for sure.
Okay. What is one skill you wish you had earlier in your career?
Ah, uh, I would say, yeah, looking at it from a risk perspective. Sorry to lean back, but yeah, looking at those or understanding what risk means for an organization.
Okay. One piece of advice that you would give to every early career professional.
Explore everything but try to find your niche as you're exploring. So you find that early on.
And what gives you hope when you're working on sustainability in sport?
Ah, it's an easy one. The fans. That external pressure always helps.
Okay, nice. Good quick answers, by the way. Sometimes when I do quick fire questions, people just like really do chat. So that was very impressive. Excellent.
I wanted to stay on your good side. So I was like, you know what?
Um, good. Um, I've still got a few more questions, but I'm just going to hold them for now because I've seen that we've got some questions coming through, and I want to make sure that we've got time to do your questions first. Let me have a look. I've just seen them coming in. So all right, you ready? With reports indicating that half of the 16 host stadiums for 2026 require immediate environmental intervention due to extreme heat stress, what is the firm non-negotiable threshold for cancelling or moving a match to ensure the safety of fans and staff, not just the elite athletes? And is it announced publicly? Now, if you're not allowed to say this and you've signed an NDA, I completely get it, but Hemant, really, really good question as well, and really important to see how climate change is impacting on these things as well as the things that people always think about in terms of rising sea level. So yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
It's a great question. So there is a threshold. It's still it we floated it. No, we didn't float it. We executed it for the Club World Cup. For the World Cup, it's not finalized yet, so I can't give you what that actually is. That Fahrenheit. Because I'm not going to say it in Celsius. But there is one. It's probably I can probably say it's probably not as high as any of us would probably or low as any of us would like. But there is one. But I would also say that the push from my team has been then the access to water for our fans that are coming in, and making sure that I'm not part of concessions, I'm not part of that process, but knowing that hey, if you've got to pay $5 for water, that's a problem if it's a very very hot day, for those to have general essence. So we've really focused on not only how can we get when fans are waiting misters and all of that in place, but also making sure all the water fountains and water refill stations are open during the matches, and allowing fans to bring in a certain type of water bottle to fill it up, to make sure that they are staying hydrated. So that's we're working on that mitigation approach while they're finalizing that threshold is. But it's not it can it'll fall within. I'm sure all of us would want it to be lower, but it'll fall within a certain range.
I don't think you should underestimate how difficult it is to get venue security to agree to bring a water bottle in, and actually like really identifying what type of one that is and allowing people to bring it in because it can be used as a projectile. And with like this entire range of fans coming in from around the world, that's quite a significant shift that actually allows people to maintain hydration in sort of the safe areas. Hemant, you've got another question here, just exploring whether hosting matches in cooler regions or in a different season would have brought down emissions, and is that something you could possibly schedule when you're picking the venues? As someone that sort of knows the bid process, it's pretty tough to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Fair point. Yeah, if it is cooler, there's certain operational situations where we don't need to run as many things to actually, keep the fan environment better suited. But Yeah, and with this game, I don't think that's gonna, or as I see cup over cup, that may not necessarily be the case. But I think timings of matches are a huge piece that'll come out of 26. They came out of the Club World Cup as well. That I think moving forward, no matter the next region, even past Morocco and Saudi, to understand, hey, if we can adjust timings and make it maybe more late evening, I don't know about early morning, but you know what I mean, to accommodate for all fan bases across the world. That's a push that I have seen internally at FIFA. But yeah, regionally, that's we're still fighting that good fight.
Yeah, good answer. Question from Neha. How has your South Asian background and cultural understanding helped you in your work in this role? What strengths, for example, have you noticed that perhaps others don't have?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I'd say identity wise, this will link back to your initial question, Radha. I've across industries, but definitely in this world, leaning into the identity, not hiding from it or trying not to talk about it or bring it into the sphere of the office, and whether it's co common conversation or even in the examples I choose when I'm trying to make different arguments. A lot of times, right, you'll make a North American reference where like, hey, no, let me talk to you about a South Asia reference in this sphere. Has always benefited me. And I would always advocate that to others as well. Like lean into your identity. Don't hide it, especially in this day and age. One, we can't afford it. But two, also, you'd be surprised at then the interest and the eyes that you get on you that aren't negative, that are more, hey, there's more that this person can bring and perspective that not everyone in the room can necessarily bring. So I'd say definitely my biggest thing on identity is that definitely lean into it. But I'm not sure on the strengths piece. Do you mean like for what I've seen other South Asians? Do you want me to call out some people? But generally, I'd say in our space, I'd use our identity as a strength. That's how I'd answer that. Like, it will, it does help propel you and help you stand out. And I know that can sound cliche and perhaps fall a little flat, but I say it with true conviction because it really has. I've seen it over time. Really help.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you found it to be a strength and you haven't felt like you've had to hide it. Because, certainly 25 years ago, that's not how it felt in sport. And it's really good to sort of hear that shift. We
If
have
I can, I'd say if I don't know, but if I can say, and I'd put it in the space of, soccer is such an interesting world, definitely, and I'd say because there's also this huge fan base in Latin America. And I'd say in this office, we're South Asians, but the way I look at, I've the first time been in an environment where that's a huge part of the workforce as well. You don't always commonly see that in a lot of other workforces that I've been part of, other industries I've been part of, and how they bring their culture and their identity into this, obviously leaning into the game itself, but then also as they are, in lead operational roles, in higher roles as well, not only alongside, our European counterparts. And so, I just want to throw out there as well that,
yeah,
it's not just us, and that strength has helped many other
yeah.
types of groups. So just wanted to throw that out there
And
also.
that's a great shout. That's a great shout. So Davina is an architect, sports architect, and she would like to know what are the top three things you would want architects to consider when designing sports venues and related facilities?
Oh, that's a great question. Are you building any in Morocco and Saudi as we move forward? I'll save this. Oh, that's a really good one. So, one, looking at the materials that these venues are being built out. So first and foremost, that's what I'll put out. So it's at that first end of, not what it's going to look like, but okay, here's what it looks like, but how are we going to construct these all with what material? Secondly, I'd look at the lighting in that venue that you're going to be not necessarily the electricity you're pulling, but yeah, the actual fixtures and what they're comprised of, because that's a huge piece as well that we're finding out that has a huge impact. And then the last piece that I'd say, and I just had a tip of my tongue, and of course now it's gonna fly from me, is, oh my it's gonna fly for me. But is the if there's opportunity for power generation on site, or if it always has to be pulled. I mean, I do apologize. There was one, and I'm forgetting it right now. But that's the one that would come up to mind after, if there's that possibility and can be built in as where you're actually designing the space. But among all of this leads into general sustainable certifications when we're talking about them. So for us, the requirement was around operations. There's also sustainable certifications for buildings themselves as they're being built. So I would say that that is what, from the architect perspective, that if that's a piece that a client can commit to, that yes, we want our building LEED, silver certified in sustainability, that'll give what I just listed out as well as parts of the puzzle. So if there's that opportunity for influence for that client, I'd advocate for it.
Excellent. Now, I'm going to ask you this next question that Nishant has put down, but I understand if you might not be allowed to answer it, but hopefully we're in a safe space over here. So
Right.
which host city or venue is leading the way on sustainability so far, and which one could do better? You allowed to answer that?
uh, I can give my opinion. I don't know
Yeah.
if I'd say oh yeah, I can give my opinion. How about that? I mean, look, everyone's bringing their A game for this. I feel like I have to say that, paint that with a broad brush. And I do say that actually quite confidently. But obviously, we always have progressive venues in cities. So, and if you were to look at it, it's actually on two different coasts. I'd say, Seattle's doing really well, Vancouver's doing really well. You come down south, you've got Atlanta that's really leading in a lot of spaces. Or even sometimes Miami's got some initiatives that are quite interesting. And I'd say, even in Mexico, our Monterrey team has really made a lot of strides. So across the board, but if I had to pick out a few, they're definitely, even in the general sports world,
Hmm.
actually making quite strides. So it wouldn't be just me saying it. But definitely, regionally, we've got some that we've been working on. The southern part of America, also has other cities that definitely have a different take around sustainability. So definitely having to push the needle there to say, hey, even if it's just for the World Cup, but obviously we're looking at legacy in those spaces, that would be the space. Obviously, Mexico, we've got, like I talked about Monterrey, but there's two or three cities in that country that definitely room for more growth, and I think they're learning from each other as well. I gotta say, in Canada, there's not much I can say. They'll blow all three countries out of the park, and I can say that. But yeah, so it's been an interesting road, and they're definitely competitive with each other, which has helped our agenda.
Yeah, for sure. And to whatever extent you're comfortable answering this, how much do you think the political leaning, like the red or blue state or even the city, how much of that does influences their outlook on sustainability? I.e., are there some that are just going to hit your minimum standards and say we've done it, we don't believe in climate change anyway, sort of thing, or are there some that have, do you think the political climate, pun not intended, has had an influence on the cities, particularly in the last sort of 12-18 months?
Oh, that's a good question. Uh, I have been very surprised. No, I mean, yes, when you think of progressives, yeah, you look at the West Coast and so on, but no, I mean, like you look at Kansas City, man, they're sorting waste on site.
Yeah.
Right, you look at even Houston's trying their best, and then New York is the one that's pushing back on us. So I wouldn't actually, I'd say there's been a lot of stereotypes dispelled in this with this World Cup. So obviously I'm not going to turn a blind eye. Yes, there is a little bit, but overall, no, it really depends a lot of times on the venue itself, maybe on the team that sits
Mhm.
predominantly in that venue, the fan base that has really I've seen make more of a change than others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that sort of makes sense when you think about Atlanta and the brilliant work that they've already been doing at Mercedes-Benz around this, and they've been really proactive with it. And therefore, it makes a lot of sense that they've
Yeah.
been able to move further forward as a result of the World Cup versus sitting on their laurels, which is great.
Yeah.
Um, Thinking bigger picture, what do you anticipate to be the biggest issues to tackle in the future? And that's from Vipul.
In the world or
In the
in
world, full stop. No, in terms of sport and sustainability, which ones should we be
I
focusing
was
on?
like, yeah, we could change the discussion. I mean, listen, what are the upcoming things to tackle? That's a good question. So. in this space, one, I'd say really having a lot more venues, leagues, so on, have a strategic direction in sustainability. So have public either targets or strategies. I will say that's, I mean, I know FIFA gets a lot of flack for a lot of things, but the fact that they have a public strategy around this is huge for sporting or organizations. So that's one piece that I think still, what does that look like in the sports world? Does that need to hit all seven objectives that I talked about? I could debate that, right? I think this industry can really think about it. Other piece, like I mentioned before, definitely data collection and visualization to make better decisions in this space. I think there's so much opportunity here. There's enough funding, there's enough push that this can be this industry actually, I can say after a while won't have any excuse, especially with its reach.
Yeah.
That can be done. And then the last piece, I'd really say, and I don't know, and I'm putting the onus on this industry, but I think it can be across, is really around fan engagement and education in this space. Because that's been one that I've had a lot of, sleepless nights on, because that's one that in other industries we didn't have to educate the consumer, right? Or whatever it may have been. That's not necessarily our mandate, but here it is. And I really think that's an interesting one that I haven't seen. I don't know if there's a perfect plan for it, but I've seen some good examples, but there's not really a North Star of
Yeah.
like, this is how you engage a fan. This is how you make it long lasting. This is how it then can trickle across the whole group. I think that's an interesting one that in the long run, I'd love to see who leads it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Particularly obviously on the strategy one, because we're a sports strategy consultancy that writes sustainability and impact plans, and I would like to continue the business growing.
There you
But
go.
I think you're right. The fan engagement one is really interesting, and you're right. I don't think anyone's really got it perfectly. I think there are pockets of really, really good practice. Obviously, I'm going to say Liverpool, but to take recycling in Anfield on match day from 9% up into the 90s within one season can only be done through fan education and engagement. And that's a combination of the infrastructure you change in the space, the education you put around it, and then the bigger picture things that Liverpool did, like the World Earth Day skit that they did in 2024, which ended up with Mo Salah as James Bond, and it got more eyeballs on it than any other bit of partner content. And so it isn't one thing that I think an organization needs to do. It is trying to pull in little bits and pieces. But yeah, it's not easy. And just to balance it out, the awful people at Man City, the team, I mean, but the actual club, brilliant. They did an
Yeah.
incredible piece of content that really showed what would happen if we didn't start dealing with the climate crisis and the impacts it would have on the stadium itself and the ability to play. So I think where we start to see teams and leagues using their influence in here is a really, really important time. We have a few to go, and I'm going to few minutes to go and ask you, Sudeep has asked, is there a good major to pursue when looking into careers related to different areas of sports or specifically sustainability?
No, that's a good question. Yeah. So obviously in sustainability, there could be sustainability studies, there could be environmental studies. You can even go into biology. So, all those would connect, chemistry would connect too. But generally, as I said before, we've got 60 different departments. So big things that I'd say, I mean, anything like around our PMO office, our project management, skill sets, something that, general administration degrees, though that's always helpful. Like I said, supply chain and logistics, huge for this industry. That's a really good one. Always need a good engineer. Our group always steps up in that realm. So I'd say, hey, that's one as well. And then the last piece is actually, I know I've mentioned hospitality, but I know there are degrees that kind of are focused on hospitality, but across. Like, I mean, it's not just, in the way that we use it for this World Cup, but that's another big one around like guest operations and so on, that I don't know what that degree is called, but I know I've seen focus areas on that as well. So all highly needed in this space.
I've seen loads and loads of stuff come out over the last 6 months about volunteer opportunities at this World Cup, and it's been wonderful to see that. And we have a question here from Avni around actually opportunities for young people to be involved with FIFA's sustainability work specifically, maybe not general volunteering, maybe in relation to the 2027 Women's World Cup in Brazil. Don't know if that's in your sphere of influence, Sarah, but I'll ask the question.
Yeah, I mean, hey, please drop me a line for the 27 Cup. We've got time. Yeah, I'd say for 26. Yeah, I'm glad everyone saw the volunteer reach out. Yeah, those are now I think they've chosen who the volunteers will be. It's a pretty big operation, as you can imagine, across these three countries. But yeah, let's get in touch about Brazil. I know they'll be looking, so happy to refer anyone.
Brilliant. Listen, we've got about a minute or so to go, so I'm going to close the conversation out there and say, Sarah, thank you for coming and sharing so candidly about your experience, about actually what FIFA's doing. I know FIFA gets a lot of flack, and it takes courage to come and stand and talk about everything, particularly a topic like this. So really appreciate you doing it, the fact that you're doing this work, and see the way that you're doing such a good job of it. So thank you for taking the time to answer the questions, and I'll hand it back to Nimra.
Yes, thank you, Radha and Sada, for your time today. I know I learned a lot. I didn't even think about things like, wastage of food and, saving that and all these cool things that go into sustainability in the world of sports and how they intersect. So I'll be watching for these live when we, go to games and the different fan fest and see how these FIFA initiatives play out. That being said, thank you for joining our event today.